I'm Weerada, the CEO and co-founder of FilmDoo. I'm here today to talk about a little story, and that story is actually my story about how I came to launch FilmDoo. And of course, in the heart of it all is talking about the integration and the meeting point of art and science. So film and technology, and how the power of film and technology together can be combined to have such a powerful and what we can now call transformative impact. So I'm just going to share a little presentation just to talk things through a little bit. But this is a very informal session, and I think at the end of my presentation, I'd love to open the floor. Love to hear from you, love to get your questions, and yeah. So FilmDoo, the way we describe ourselves now is that actually we're a game-based edutainment platform that makes it easy and fun to teach and learn languages through film. So that's the power of film as well. But how did we start? So this is a little bit about me. So in the introduction you heard, film is an extension of me because I had the opportunity to live in 11 countries across 5 continents. So that I always knew there was a great world of film outside of Hollywood. But more than that, I knew about the power of film to help connect people, to help people create understanding for other places, other culture, and how films really help create empathy and evoke emotions and understanding of other people. And that was the power of film. I worked in technology before. So at some point in my life, a few years ago, I decided that technology and film together was a powerful way that I would love to contribute to the world, and of course go on to help others transform their own lives. This is what we started off with. So growing up, I knew that there were so many more films than the mainstream cinema, as we've seen. Actually, 50,000 films get made around the world every year, and so few ever gets seen or distributed outside of their country. Some of these are actually even award-winning film. And this is, of course, due to a film distribution industry that predates the internet. But with technology today, it just didn't make sense why people can't discover easily, can't access all these great films around the world, especially when they're a little bit older and they've done their cinema, they've done their festival. But why can't we see these films that's been made? But at the heart of it is an even bigger problem. And that's because these films all represent stories, and more important, they give voices. So it's all about helping these underrepresented stories and voices from around the world to actually get seen and heard. So it's more important than ever that these films and these stories get distributed and discovered. So this is FilmDoo. So if you go to filmdoo.com, you will see straight away that our motto and mission has always been about get connected to the world through film. And if you go on the language tab, you'll see that actually, because we have a lot of films around the world, actually we also have films in many languages. And I'll come to this because that's where our curation of film and the power of film eventually leads to on this journey. But that's what we started off with. Now, I'm going to quote someone who I'm sure you all know very well and knows this better than me, and that's Ted Hope, the producer of 21 Grams. And he said it best, that movies have a unique capacity to create empathy for people and actions we don't know or have not experienced. That's the power of film, and that's the transformative element of film. And I will always say, film is my favorite art form because it is the master of all arts. It combines music, it combines cinematography, it combines acting, it combines maybe even artwork within the film. All these sensory emotions come together to evoke such a strong feeling in you, and also a heightened feeling of understanding. And that is the power of film that is more, at least in my opinion, more than any other art form and medium out there. So why is film important? Because in addition to that, film is actually a great way that you can learn, you can convey a message, you can create an immersive element. Film is engaging, first of all. Time passes when you're watching a film, and a short film as well, documentary, or in fact video in general as well. It's engaging. People can be entertained. It can be in a low anxiety environment. They're more relaxed, they're having fun, which is why actually it's great for learning as well through film and video, because it helps you to not feel so pressurized. Actually, film is really great for that. Film is powerful because it often has a strong message or has this really great message, whether it's the environment, the cultural changes, contemporary trends. It creates a talking point. And often we get into discussions or, schools or universities or, a film club, they use film to have really interesting debates and discussions. They portray a message. I mentioned that, of course, they can help create really strong emotions and empathy, which is very important right now. Lately, but apart from the good news we've had the last few days, there was a time when I felt that the world was becoming more divided. We're building more walls when we actually should be building bridges. And actually, film is the way that we could build these bridges faster than ever before. And of course, film can help you resonate. And that is why film is actually a great way to immerse, learn, and connect. In particular, film is actually really useful in giving context, right? Especially in language learning. And our journey as FilmDoo came into language learning because by default, since we launched, we have a lot of films in French, Spanish, English, of course, Thai, Japanese, and so forth. In fact, we now have one of the world's biggest international film catalog. But what was interesting is that we saw that 80% of the people who were coming to our site was not searching by film director name and not searching by film name, but they were searching by language related searches. So I'm studying French, where can I watch Japanese? I'm studying French, where can I watch French films? And just today I had someone who said, I'm learning Japanese. I'd love to see your Japanese collection. So when we really looked into it, then we ran a survey, and then more than 70% of our users actually told us the number one reason they're watching a film on FilmDoo is they are learning a foreign language. And that's why we realize that actually, even beyond, just the story, the entertaining element of it, film can be transformative in the sense that it can help you connect to the culture. Once you connect to the culture, it actually motivates and helps you stay on track, especially when you're learning languages, a lot faster. And this quote, I really love it. It says, actually learning a language without the cultural framework it exists in, it's like cooking ethnic food without the spices of the region. You simply will remove all the flavor from the language. And that's why, a lot of people learn languages using language apps or other methods. But after a while, there's a very high dropout rate because they don't engage, they don't connect. But with film, it helps you to connect to that and to make that content stay relevant. And most of all, you're motivated to understand, just like the way children learn language naturally. That's how powerful film is. Specifically in language learning, actually, this is really interesting. They actually don't use enough film or videos right now, especially film. And that is where the opportunity is. I think there's a lot of value and power in film beyond the entertainment value. And that's where we see the opportunity, actually. And I'm really interested in working with filmmakers, actually, around the world as well, because a lot of great films can't get made. And then, first of all, if they may not get the distribution. But second of all, if they're available to be seen online, there's a whole world of audience out there beyond just your typical film fans, such as language learners who would love to discover your content. And that's why it's amazing that we can continue to show these films, and especially older films as well. This is also another interesting quote that actually specifically for language learning, in a survey, 81.6% of people now say they expect to use more film and video content for language learning. Actually, it's not just language learning. It's also the future of learning, right? The average Gen Z now spends at least 4 hours a day watching mobile videos. That is the way that the younger, or the modern student now learn, now engage. They spend more time watching content online than ever before. And actually, traditional teaching methods, textbook and rote exercises, they no longer work. But film and video-based learning does. That's why filmmakers now have the power to reach directly to these students, to convey their message and to relate more with the students, and is very more relevant than ever. This is a little bit more related to language learning, but it's also quite interesting. And that is actually alluding to the fact that we learn language best when we are in a low anxiety environment where we receive a lot of comprehensible input. So comprehensible input is dialogue, it's music, it's film, just like the way children learn. So that's actually the best way proven to show long-term retention of a language rather than cramming for an exercise over a very short period of time. And that's why film is so powerful, that it can have the power to help you learn languages, especially right now when a lot more jobs are remote around the world. You can tap into career opportunities outside your country, especially in certain part of the world. Having a great English language skill suddenly opens up new career opportunities. So the power to transform even their own lives, even their own livelihoods through film is there. So where are we today and where we see the opportunity is actually this link between films and content and using online learning to help inspire people, to help deliver engaging educational content, and of course interesting messaging and stories to the world. So that's why I said we've actually now identified ourselves as an edutainment platform to help learners learners be entertained, but at the same time viewers can also learn something at the same time. But at the heart of this, so where do we start? So, and that's kind of where we're coming in. And as we all have mobile phones now, digital content can be so easily made. The reality is we have more digital content being processed than ever. Not just films, but videos, short videos, mobile videos, which in reality is competing for your time. But how do we find these films? And this is the kind of topic that really, really interests me. And that is where there's a blend of art and science. And my opinion is neither on their own is effective. It really is the combined power together that can really super amplify their effectiveness. So normally when we curate film, there's a couple of ways I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The first is editorial, right? That's when you would have a film review, you would have a film committee, you would have a film festival. So you would look for quality, or you would look for certain criteria. So that's what we call the editorial, or this, or simply put, it's handpicked or selected. So that's a selective element. Another element is community. Community is when it's the people around you to help curate, friends talking about this. It could be an online community, a film review community. It could be a forum, but it's the community that's helping you to choose. So you, in a way, you feel, oh, I really want to follow and be part of this community, or relate and connect. So it's the community that is helping to curate that element. And sometimes community also has a technology element, because technology, especially with online streaming platform, you can start to see what film is trending in the community, right? So the technology will recommend the films based on what the community is trending or is talking about. So that's an interesting one. And the third one is actually technology itself. How can we use technology to create films? But I don't think there's a perfect technology yet. And it has to be combined with a human element. It can help filter, I would say, maybe the first selection or a group of selection, but ultimately technology doesn't have what I call the soul or the ability to connect and to really have that one-to-one relationship. But technology can help you scale and curate content at scale. So the great way that technology does this, especially with if you have the data and online streaming platforms, for example, is they can see trends. They can see if you like this type of film and you are connected to someone else, they can see that there might be similarity in taste. So that's how the technology pick up. The technology can match that as well. But there are some really interesting technologies being developed as well. So for example, as I mentioned, FilmDoo has expanded into language learning using film. So how do we use technology for curation? So in this case, people are watching film because they are interested in languages, but people have different language abilities, right? And of course, in order for them to stay engaged with that content, it has to be at the right language level. Too easy and they get bored, too difficult and then they lose interest. So what we're doing using technology is we're actually develop an AI system to help recommend films based on your language level. So whether this is the data that you provide when you sign up in terms of your language level, whether, for example, we're doing some testing with Duolingo. So if we have that information, we can recommend films based on vocabulary or the level that you've just been exposed to. Or of course, like working with a lot of language schools, when the schools provide the films to their students, they can say, okay, we're looking for films for intermediate French, advanced English. But that's a great example of how technology is also able to curate films using a particular criteria. And in this case, it's language level, and in fact, personalized language level to the students. So there's some really interesting technologies going on. And for example, like, this is something we've developed in-house, but you can see we looked at really interesting parameters, such as, when you're looking at a film, you can analyze everything and you can be so creative. But then, of course, the more films you have, the more people who's watching the film, you can start to collect more really interesting analysis. So, for example, how fast someone speaks in a film, that can be determined how difficult this language level is, how many adverbs in a sentence, how many grammar, for example, although of course grammar is a little bit more complex, but that's the kind of thing. So that is an element of film curation using technology. But as I mentioned, technology alone isn't enough. At least I haven't seen in this lifetime, maybe in the future. So whatever technology is used, it's always the first element, but there's always a human element that provides context. That looks at the selection and says, yes, this is great. It can be recommended for this person, or it understands this person in a different context and says, okay, we could also recommend this other film as well. And it's this blending of art and technology that is really powerful. And when you can come to realize that, you can find films or content at scale quickly that can become more relevant, more interesting, that can go on to help you learn languages, that can go on to help you connect, make friends, have empathy around the world, but most of all, to access content that you wouldn't otherwise know about, some really, really inspiring stories that can go on to transform your life. So I think we're at the brink of some really interesting trend, and that's why I called the edutainment revolution has arrived. The way we learn, connect to the world has changed. The way we discover content, the way technology and the human soul has combined to help us give access to that great story has certainly arrived, and it's very exciting. And yes, I'd love to take your questions and love to hear from you all. I mean, it doesn't have to be a question specifically on the presentation, but if you're curious about the film industry in general, or how it works. Oh, actually, I'd like to show. Oh, sorry. There's a question. Yeah. Oh, can you speak about how culture is transmitted through film? Oh, very interesting. Well, first of all, film is it's a story, right? So if it's Arabic film, if it's Russian film, it's an English film, the filmmaker, especially if it's given the story within a local context, obviously captures history or a snapshot of that story, whether it's a point in time or in the past. But it's culture, because culture and language are intertwined. And you saw that slide, you can't really separate it. So in one way, culture is the way people behave. It's the norms. It's the way how male, female roles are interpreted. It's how people dress. It's how people treat each other. It's a relationship. Sometimes you might see a comedy and you're like, oh, that's not a very um, cultural film. Might be quite a romantic comedy, but actually this could be the culture, because it could show, maybe a woman couldn't marry a man because of their class differences. A lot of Indian comedies like this, but actually that also shows the cultural aspect. Um, cultural is actually the way you capture that society, food, trends, and behavior. And film is still the best medium, because you get to see a whole picture and how people react, respond to behaviors, and the way they talk to each other.
Excellent question, Caroline. Thank you so much, and really good answer. Thank you. I had a question.
Sure.
I think it's been very encouraging over the past couple of years. I think when one first starts getting into film, it seems that it's like this British and American canon, and with Parasite and also the popularity of Netflix, you see people actually opening their minds to watching things with subtitles. Where do you think is going to be kind of maybe the next location that people will start paying more attention to, in terms of like people in the Anglophone world actually starting to appreciate the filmmaking culture from like another country that seems to be putting out really good work right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, the speed of internet discovery is unprecedented, right? So more content is available online than ever, and actually Netflix is really interesting. On one hand, I really admire them, but I think on the other hand, the independent voices, I think, don't have as much opportunity to get scenes there still. But the great thing about Netflix is, because they're a global platform, so obviously, first of all, they are creating more jobs, more stories, working a lot more with local talent, because that's obviously their customer acquisition strategy. As they expand to new markets, they need to produce local content. So on one hand, it's great. They're creating really great jobs. They're creating a local audience. There's a lot more international content, and whether it's a series, etc. But on the other hand, it's also their content, right? Because a lot of it is they commission their own content. I mean, they do acquire or source films, but they tend to be very award-winning films, quite high-profile films for obviously marketing purposes. But actually, Netflix is picking up less and less independent film, because they would like to own that content, and once they own that content, it can go worldwide immediately, right? It all makes sense. But it's the underrepresented stories, the independent voices, the diversity that we should continue to celebrate and make seen. So that's an interesting phenomenon still. So the reality is, the production capacity is very different. Certain countries still have more access to film finance. In Asia, for example, there's very, very little government support for film funding and film finance. A lot of it is all privately funded, or obviously, if you collaborate with a bigger studio, then obviously you're influenced by some of the more commercial stories or mandates. So even though we will get more exposed to a lot of international content, obviously through some of the more global platforms, the reality is, I think the country with more production support from the governments, or are more advanced, that's actually Korea. Korea didn't happen overnight. It was a conscious effort. It's something I've looked a lot into it. It was a result of 20, 30 years of conscious government effort to invest, first of all, in the Korean industry, to provide subsidies, to provide subvention, to actually even protect the Korean government, the ratio that domestic films have to be shown in cinema. That allowed the Korean industry to really grow, obviously make money, grow into powerful studios, and obviously to invest in local talent. So I think where we can look at right now is countries where the government or are really starting to provide production support for these countries. I think we see quite a lot of really interesting support coming from Eastern Europe. Certain Latin American countries also have a lot of support: Argentina, Chile, Venezuela, etc. But I think there's a lot more to be done for other countries around the world. And it's with internet, there's no excuse for not discovering these stories anymore. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Another question from Rob Hurd. So, as storytellers, should we be thinking in terms of audience trends when coming up with stories, or should we follow our own inner voice? Excellent question, Rob.
I think
Thank
you
you.
can do both. I'm one of those people who think you really can do both. And in a world as this, you can't find an audience like you. But obviously it's not easy. There is a community out there, and but just because you create a film, you won't come. They won't come, right? So it's about planning. It's about finding the right partner, and even for example, if you're making a horror film, right? If that's the story you really want, then there's definitely if you're thinking about online distribution, you can already think about online platforms that you can work with, online community you can work with. So I think first of all, you have to make a story that's true and authentic to you, because otherwise how can you get up and make that film? And making a film is, I have nothing but the greatest respect for filmmakers. And that's why I do what I do, because first of all, I'm motivated by all these great films that take years of a filmmaker's life and savings and government money as well, and then they just don't get seen anymore. That is a tragedy. And all that effort, right, all those resources. So first of all, it has to be a story that you want to tell, but I guess how you tell it I guess you can be creative. If filming in one country allows you to get more funding, maybe you can change from France to Spain, for example, right? So I think there's a little bit, you have to not be so stubborn that you can't have any flexibility, but I guess in the core of your story, what are you trying to tell? What's the messaging? I think you have to be true to that. And then of course, when you're making your film, you already from the beginning can start to think who could be your audience, who could be a great partner, a great platform to distribute, and that will make it easier. So I think thinking who could be your audience, and it's not one, there can be more than one audience, right? But of course, how you reach out to those audiences, the messaging and the value of your film to those audience can be different. But I genuinely think you can do both. Yeah.
Excellent.
I would like to add, sorry, one more as well as a filmmaker, because something I certainly see. So I think when you make a film, you also have to think about production budget and finance, because the reality is that you want to make your film work and also obviously be able to recoup the costs and obviously hopefully make a margin profit. That is the reality, right? It's also, unfortunately or fortunately, film is also a business. As a filmmaker, I think that's more to than just telling your story, but how can I tell my story in a way that I don't make a loss or I can recoup something? So the reality is that with the film industry, where I see is that the trend is emerging. On one hand, you have really mega budgets, like 100 million plus. You either have to collaborate with a really big studio or distributor, or you have to make a smaller budget film, like what I call small budget film. So within a few 100,000, not more than 1 million. But the mid-market film, like the 2, 3, 4, 5 million, etc., that's completely collapsed. It's very difficult to make money now, just because in the olden days, a film of this size, you can find more international cinema or distributor. You can then go on and obviously make DVDs, etc. There's a lot more outlet. But actually now what we're seeing is that there's less distribution outlet, less cinema, less, even some of TVs in some countries are picking up less foreign film. So if you invest in making a film of that mid-size, it's much harder to recoup it. Whereas if you make a film that is a smaller budget, the chance that you can obviously go directly online, find an online partner, you can still. So I think, do you really need to make your story at that budget, right? So I think just being flexible in that as well. And I think when you obviously can have success within your film, even though it's a smaller budget, have a couple of that, then that's something to show for. Then you can go on to make a super big film at the same time. So I think it's also having that financial mindset. What can I do that will make me be sustainable, viable, and tell my story as well. Mm-hmm.
That's a really brilliant addition. Thank you, Weerada. And yeah, it's a very good point as well. Like you see a lot of excellent films, especially historically, that have been done on shoestring budgets because the story is so strong.
Yeah.
So Yeah, thank you, Rob, for that question.
Remember some of the greatest director, like Christopher Nolan, or even the director of Parasite. They all started from really, really low, smaller budget films when they started, but they were able to tell their story, told it well, showed they could recoup the cost, and that's what people want to see. That you can make a story, it stay within budget, and that itself gives you credibility as a film director and a producer as well.
Excellent. I think you got one more question. Rob's just saying thank you.
Oh, okay.
I had another question for you, Weerada, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you've lived across 11 countries, which is incredible. And I just wanted to ask you if you could talk more about a film that might have been from like a kind of smaller kind of filmmaker, quite small, maybe from someone who's more underrepresented, but kind of like helped you develop your thoughts about like how integrated like film and culture and language are, like something that a film that you hold particularly close to your heart in.
Well, it's one of the films that
motivating you.
Yeah, one of the things I'm very proud of, is sometimes we are the only place to help a film get discovered and outside that country. So sometimes that's the thing that I'm like, wow, how did this gem remain undistributed? So sometimes it's just because they couldn't get distribution, or sometimes they just didn't think about international distribution because their core focus has been a domestic market. But I think there's two films that I'm particularly really, really proud of. One is a documentary. We may possibly be the only place in the world that shows it, that is called Dreaming Against the World. It's a documentary about a Chinese dissident artist who obviously was speaking against the Chinese government, and was locked in jail for many, many years. His name is called Mu Sin. But secretly, what he used to do is he used to paint at night, right? So he would be in jail at night, he would paint. And after he was finally released, his artwork obviously was in a gallery, and I think he might even move to New York. I lived into New York for a while. But that is culture. It obviously has more of a political message, human rights message as well. But when you watch that film, it really resonates. It's like, okay, it gives you awareness. Oh, wow, I didn't know this. Oh, wow, how does art keep you alive all those years? Just like Mandela, right? He was in jail. It was art that drove him to every night to create something. That hunger to stay alive, to create art, was what kept him alive. And obviously this film isn't known very widely for a number of reasons, of course, but that is the kind of stories that should be seen and discovered. So that's the story that resonated with me. Another kind of story is the kind of film that breaks the stereotype, or and especially, unfortunately, with film, sometimes you see a lot of stereotype, right? Like, oh, Asian characters are like this, or French characters are like this. So and sometimes it's funny, and obviously sometimes stereotypes are there for for scripting purposes, etc. But a film that I particularly like is called In the Absence of the Sun. And it's a film also that at the time we were the first person to show outside of Indonesia by a young Indonesian filmmaker. So, when you have a view sometimes living abroad, Indonesia, it seems like a country that's less developed, especially if you haven't lived there before, politically unstable, a lot of economic difficulty, etc. That's your picture of Indonesia. But actually, the story was super interesting. It's actually about young Indonesians. A young Indonesian couple who actually fell in love in New York. They were actually a lesbian couple, and obviously when they came back to Jakarta, they can't be together, obviously for cultural reasons and etc. But it shows Jakarta as it is, modern Jakarta. Real young Indonesians, how they struggle to assimilate to modern day Jakarta, to the traditional Indonesian, having lived and grown up and studied abroad as well. And which is, like me, many Asian are now studying abroad they've been exposed to different things. They have to return to their countries, but their country is not a backwater, as when you're reading films from the 50s or 60s. It's also a modern, changing character, and you see a country as it is today, what the contemporary characters are going through, their contemporary challenges, but at the heart of it all, they're still going through that eternal question: love, a family struggles, identity, and actually what's great about, I see so many films, and actually what's interesting is that at the heart of it all these films and all these different countries, different culture, they're so alike. They talk about the same thing, finding yourself, family, love, loss of love, and people around the world are so similar at the heart of it all, and that's why films can break that barrier and help you to connect. Yeah. So yes, so for me, those are some of my favorite films, and there's so many more films that I wish more people could get the chance to see.
Oh, that was a brilliant answer. Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that what you said about everyone being essentially the same, and also like these experiences, there's a tendency to essentialize, especially when it's countries that to the West seem like they're underdeveloped, as you said. And to like just cast them off, and it's so lovely to hear your passion about film and your passion about getting these films seen. It's so important and so valuable. So thank you so much, Weerada. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who has attended today. So a couple of just notes before we finish off. There's only a couple of minutes left.
Have a quick video just to show before I finish off. That's okay.
Oh yes, sure, certainly.
Show a very quick video just to. I appreciate some of you. And I think we have a filmmaker here. We're always looking to work with great filmmakers, and of course with your great filmmaker fans. So essentially, this is how you can get in touch. And obviously, we'd love to be able to show your stories. It's a little short video that that we use to show our filmmaker and tell our story. And I would like to hear your story. So there you go. So please do get in touch if you're a filmmaker, or you have any friends or contacts who are filmmakers.